We were lucky enough to have you on our show twice while you were in the White House. The first time was 2012 on Late Night, and then again in 2016 at the end of your presidency. And I have to say that I saw a different President Obama the second time around, because the first time around, I don't know if you remember this, but we did a Slow Jam the News bit, and at the end I go, it was great. It was one of our best things we ever did, and I said at the end, can you go like, oh yeah, and you go, no. And I go, yeah, but maybe just can you give like a little, like oh, and you go, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'll say, oh yeah, and I go, okay, yep, absolutely right. And by the way, those writers, Bashir and Diallo, went on to do Sherman Showcase and Southside. They're doing really well, like the same writers that wrote Slow Jam. And they were so excited to write that for you. And then
one of my greatest pieces ever, by the way.
Thank you.
I loved Slow Jam.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I was terrific.
That was the fun. And then the end of your presidency, we did another Slow Jam, and at the end, I wrote in a part where I wanted you to, like, kind of stiffly say, like Rihanna, we have to go to work, 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 work. And you go, why do you have me doing that? Like, can I go like, work, 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 work? And I go, stop. You cannot. And I was telling you, no, 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 you're this close to leaving the White House. Do not. Do not do that now. You've been so perfect all the way. No, do not. We're not doing that. And you, okay, all right, yeah.
Are you saying that that would have affected my legacy?
Yeah.
Because that is a jam, and I know that jam well.
No.
No,
you kept.
I'm a little insulted.
Yeah.
That you didn't think I could pull it off.
You should be, but I saved your legacy. That moment in time, and hopefully that makes it in the second volume of the book. That night, I also introduced you to Madonna. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that.
And I'll never forget this, because I go, Madonna would like to meet you, and you go, sure. And we went over to see Madonna, and she, she's so like tiny, but she's like very like, she's very flirty and kind of just very like, she's Madonna. She's very sexy, and she was like, hello, hi, and you go, all business. You're like, hello, pleasure to meet you. I was like, that's right. That's the way Michelle would be like, that's right. That's how you do it.
You know what? Don't think that you elected a fool.
Okay.
I knew.
Yep, you knew.
I knew how to handle my business.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about music, and you were saying that you're like a Earth, Wind, and Fire guy, and then you were talking about Dylan, and there's so many iconic music moments in your White House history, and you talk about it in the book, and you even have a Spotify playlist based on the book. I just thought we'd talk about a couple memories. Beyonce at Last.
Beyonce sang. She sang at our inauguration. That was our first dance with, at the very first ball. And it was spectacular.
I mean, her doing At Last.
Michelle was dressed in that white gown, and as I write in the book, she was just special.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yep, just stunning.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan, I don't really remember the story. Did he not talk to you or something, or?
That's what happened. He was Dylan-esque. He's exactly how you wanted him to be.
Yes.
I describe in the book, we had these concerts, and they were really wonderful. They'd be themed, so you had a Motown night, or you had a Broadway, or
yep.
We had a poetry slam, and we'd usually have kids from the surrounding area come in, and the artists would do workshops on music or performance, and then they'd do rehearsals, and so by the time you actually had the concert, they'd been hanging around for a while. There was a photo line. Dylan, he skips all that, right? Literally shows up a few minutes before he's about to go on, comes on his trio, does this incredible rendition of The Times They Are Changing.
Gosh.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Finishes, walks off the stage, stands in front of Michelle and me, does a quick nod, leaves.
He's out. Yeah.
That's it.
He's gone. Yeah.
And, you know, just mysterious, you know, has a little kind of quirky smile on his face.
Yep.
Perfect.
Exactly what you want from Bob Dylan.
That's what you want from Bob Dylan. You know, you don't want him to be all, you know,
That's fake.
chatty and,
That wouldn't-
you know, eating off the cheese plate and all that stuff.
It wouldn't
right?
be real. It wouldn't be
It'd
him.
disappoint you.
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Where does your love for music come from?
Well, look, I don't come from a musical family, but I think that partly because I had such a strange childhood, right? I'm mom from Kansas, dad from Kenya, in Hawaii, lives in Indonesia for a while, et cetera.
It's an interesting playlist right there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. But what it also meant was I was moving around a lot. I was an only child till I was 9. And so I think music becomes one of those things that keeps you company. And it becomes a way for you to connect with other people and kids your age. And so, you know, I still remember first 2 albums I ever bought with my own money, right? Stevie Wonder's Talking Book and Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And pretty good choices,
yeah.
I have to say.
They have fantastic ones.
Yeah, and you know, from that time forward, I think music was just always, you know, something I cared deeply about. And Michelle and I, as I describe in the book, I think used music as a way of reminding people of the magic of America. Is we have all these traditions that we draw from that all get kind of jumbled up, right? You know, you've got country music and blues and rock and roll and gospel and hip hop and you know, reggaeton and all that stuff is this medley, this blend of, you know, Irish folk songs and African drums and you know, all these different traditions. And that in some ways is what makes America exceptional. It's the reason why American culture exports everywhere, because people get a sense of there's a piece of me in here. And so we thought it was important to have that kind of music in the White House as representing the kind of America we should want, where everybody's, you know, part of the band and everybody, you know, gets to play and sing and make music.
I agree with that because when I was growing up, it was either like, what are you into? Are you into rock? Are you into pop? Are you into classical? It's like now this new iPod generation, or you know, and where it's just like
it's an it's an example of what I meant when I said these kids, you know, they're better than us. They're more because they're drawing from everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Legitimate. Like,
you know,
honestly,
they don't think in terms of categories. You know, sometimes Sasha, you know, she's got, you know, 2 Chains on, and then next thing you know, she's got an Elvis song on, and then suddenly, you know, it's you know, Drake, and you know, next thing you know, it's you know, some Rachmaninoff or something. And what are you doing? But to them, it all makes sense, and I think that's
it's
an indicator of how their hearts and minds are more embracing of differences and see the good in so many people.
Speaking of Drake, he's recently said that he'd love to play you in a movie, and you gave your stamp of approval. What would your advice would you give Drake in order to nail the performance? What's the key to playing Barack Obama?
Well, apparently, based on all the people who do imitations of me, the key is to talk really slowly.
Why would anyone do that? That is offensive.
And the slower, the more strange pauses there are.
This is what the This is what the audiobook sounds like. This is unbelievable. The audiobook is actually 365 days long. It is living a year with you talking. It is so great talking to you. Congratulations again on A Promised Land. I really love speaking with you, and I meant it when I said it. I miss you.
It's on and on and on. I said, and it's on.